Hey guys, R4GE VipeRzZ, and today I'm going to show you how you can change the BIOS of your Gigabyte motherboard using QFlash Plus. Now obviously your motherboard will need to have QFlash Plus support. If it doesn't, then you won't be able to use this method. Now with QFlash Plus, you can change the BIOS of your motherboard without having any RAM or CPU installed. Instead, you will just need your 24-pin power and your 8-pin EPS power connected to your motherboard so that it has power. So this is useful in cases where you have a CPU that is supported on a newer version of your motherboard's BIOS. However, your motherboard currently has an older version that doesn't support the CPU that you have. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get hold of a USB that has a FAT32 partition on it that we can then put the BIOS file onto. And then once we've done that, we can then plug the USB into the correct port on the motherboard and then press the QFlash Plus button to flash the new BIOS to the motherboard. So the first thing you want to do is you want to come to the Gigabyte website and you want to find your exact model of motherboard, and if there are multiple different revisions, you want to have a look at your motherboard and you want to find where the revision number is printed on it so that you can see what revision number you have. So as you can see, I am on the revision 1.2/1.3 version, as my motherboard is the revision 1.3 version. So once you've made sure that you're on the page for your exact motherboard model with the correct revision selected, you then want to come over to the support tab. And then inside of the support tab, you then want to scroll down to BIOS and you want to click on it. And then you most likely want to go with the newest BIOS. However, you can go with whatever BIOS version you want. So I'm going to download the latest version. So now that's downloaded, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to come over to the manual. And I will just open up the English manual. So in the manual, I'm just going to scroll down until we get down to the motherboard layout. And then looking at the motherboard layout, you want to find where your QFlash Plus button is. So as you can see for me, it is just on the back I/O. However, it could be elsewhere on your motherboard. For example, it may be down at the bottom here. So this is where the QFlash button is located on my motherboard, and this is where the QFlash LED that is going to tell us the status of its installation is located. So now we've gone over that, we now want to get on with setting up our USB. So obviously you need a USB that is large enough for your BIOS file. However, most BIOS files are not that large, so any modern day USB should be large enough. Now the issue is if your USB is bigger than 32 gigabytes, then we're going to have to create a smaller 32 gigabyte partition on the USB and then format that to FAT32. Now this is because the motherboard will only be able to read from FAT32 file partitions, so any modern day NTFS file partition will not work. So to do that, we're just going to come to search and we're going to type create and open up create and format hard disk partitions. Now as you can see here, disk 1 is my USB, and just for demonstration purposes, I will fully remove everything off it. Now I would recommend that you do not have anything on the USB that you want, as it is easiest just to be able to fully wipe it. So I will just quickly delete my volume, just so that it's like a new USB. So if your USB is 32 gigabytes or smaller, then you won't need to create a smaller partition on it, you can format the whole USB. However, if it is bigger than 32 gigabytes, you will need to create a 32 gigabyte partition and format that to FAT32. So to do that, you just want to right click on the unallocated space, create a new simple volume, click next. Now this is where we set the size of our partition. So again, if your USB is less than 32 gigabytes or is 32 gigabytes, then you can just leave it at its default value. However, if it is larger than that, you want to set its size to 32,000 megabytes, which is just under the 32 gigabyte limit. So if we now click next, and we let it automatically assign its default drive letter, now at this screen here, we want to make sure that the file system is FAT32. So if it is on NTFS, change it to FAT32. And then if you want, you can give it a name. I'm just going to call it BIOS USB. And then I will click next, and now I will click finish. So there we go, that has now created us a FAT32 partition on our USB that we can now put the BIOS files onto. So if we now just close disk management, and I will just bring the BIOS file onto the desktop for you. So there we go, so now we have this zip file. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to unzip it. So if we just right click on it and then extract all, and we will just extract it like so. And there we go, the zip file has now been extracted. So when you open up the folder, if there are multiple different files, the file that is most likely the one that you are looking for is the one that ends in the file type name that is your BIOS version name. So if you remember, I downloaded the FE BIOS, and as you can see, the file is ended in .fe, as it was the FE version that I downloaded. Now if you cannot see your file types, all you have to do is come to View, and then click File Name Extensions to be able to see the file name extensions. So once you've located your BIOS file, you now need to rename it. So if we just right click on the file and we rename it, what we need to do is we need to fully select all of the text inside it, so including the file type, and then we need to rename it to gigabyte.bin and then press enter. And then when it comes up warning you that you're changing the file name extension, you can just click yes to that, as that is what we want to do. So once you made sure that your file has been renamed to gigabyte.bin and it does have the bin file type, we can now move the file over onto our USB. Well, I'll just open up a new file explorer, and then I will select my BIOS USB, and I will bring the file across onto the USB. So there we go, we now have the gigabyte.bin file on the BIOS USB. So now we've done that, we can now unplug the USB, and we want to now come over to our computer and plug the USB into the correct port. Right, so now we're around the back of the computer, we now need to find the USB port that is labelled BIOS, as this is the USB port that we need to plug the USB into. Now I don't know if you can see, but this USB port here is labelled BIOS just above it, so this is the USB port that I need to plug my USB into. So I'll just come closer in so you can see it a bit better. Hopefully you should be able to see that it says BIOS there, so you want to find whichever one is labelled the BIOS for you. So this is the one that we need to plug the USB into, so I'm going to plug the USB into the USB port. And now the USB is plugged in, we now need to press on the QFlash Plus button. So it's important that you do not have the computer turned on at the minute. However, you do need to have your power plugged into it, and your power supply needs to be turned on, with your motherboard having the 24-pin power plugged in, and the 8-pin EPS power plugged in. So once you've made sure your motherboard does have power, you want to press the QFlash button on the back. So now we press that, you should be able to see that the orange light is now flashing, and that means that the BIOS is now getting updated with the BIOS image that is on the USB. So now the QFlash Plus LED has stopped flashing, that means that the BIOS should now be updated to the version that was on the USB. So you should now be able to install your CPU into your motherboard if you haven't already, and you should be able to connect everything up to your computer, boot into it, and get into your BIOS. So guys, hopefully that worked for you. If you liked the video, don't forget the like button. If you dislike it, hit the dislike button. Subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you another time. Bye.